The Long Beach Municipal Auditorium held exactly 9,783 seats on the night of August 2, 1964. Every one of them was filled. The floor had been cleared and roped and chalked into a competition grid, and the overhead lights cast a flat industrial brightness across the mats that erased every shadow. Concession wrappers moved in slow circles near the ventilation ducts. A man 3 rows from the press table was counting his program pages for the second time. The air smelled of canvas and rosin and the particular stillness that precedes something that cannot be undone. The International Karate Championships had drawn the finest competition fighters in North America. 47 black belts had registered. 17 nations had sent representatives. The tournament director, a heavyset man named Ed Parker who had built the event from a gymnasium and a conviction, stood at the edge of the floor and watched the brackets fill. He had seen 400 tournaments. He had learned not to be impressed by credentials alone. But even Parker was watching the young man from Los Angeles. His name was Carlos Ray Norris. He was 24 years old. He stood 6 feet even and weighed 183 pounds. He had returned from Osan Air Base in South Korea 14 months earlier, carrying a first-degree black belt in Tang Soo Do and an appetite for competition that the civilian martial arts circuit had not yet found a way to satisfy. He had won his last 9 consecutive tournament bouts. He moved with the unhurried certainty of someone who had already thought several thoughts ahead of his opponent. In the brackets, he was seated first in his division. In the room, he was the name people said when other names came up short. He did not know, on that August evening, that a man seated 4 rows behind the east scoring table was watching him with a calm and particular attention. In 6 minutes, that man would step onto the floor. In 9 seconds of what followed, the 9,783 people inside the Long Beach Municipal Auditorium would witness something that none of them would describe the same way twice, and none of them would ever fully forget. What Carlos Ray Norris said from the center of that floor before the encounter began is the reason this story exists. What Bruce Lee answered, in movement rather than words, is the reason it has never entirely been put to rest. Stay until the end. The sentence Bruce Lee spoke before he walked away from that floor will matter more to you than the 9 seconds did. To understand what happened on the evening of August 2nd, you must first understand what Carlos Ray Norris had become in the years between Osan and Long Beach. He had not drifted into the martial arts. He had been assigned to them. A young airman from Ryan, Oklahoma, unassuming in the ordinary way of men who have not yet been asked the right question. He had walked into a Tang Soo Do gym in South Korea as a gesture of curiosity and recognized within the first 3 sessions that he had found the one discipline in which his particular qualities, patience, economy of movement, and almost clinical indifference to the discomfort of training, translated into something close to mastery. He had trained 6 days a week for 22 months. He had broken both hands twice, once each in sequence. He had competed against Korean practitioners who had been in the arts since before he could read, and he had lost to them and studied the losses with the same attention he gave to wins. By the time he returned to California, he was a different kind of problem than the men he would meet on the American tournament circuit. The American karate scene in 1964 was young and self-serious and loosely organized. Its champions were genuine athletes. They had trained hard and they had earned their rankings through competition, not mythology. But the sport had developed in a particular direction, toward clean technique, toward tournament point scoring, toward a kind of formalized expression of violence that was, at its core, a different thing from violence itself. Norris had trained inside the Korean tradition, which did not make this distinction so carefully. His movement was not decorative. It was not optimized for judges. It was optimized for the specific problem of another trained man trying to hurt him. On the tournament floor, this read as something quietly alarming, even to men who outweighed him by 30 pounds. By August of 1964, he had not lost a point tournament bout in 11 months. He had begun to carry himself the way men do when they have not yet encountered the correct calibration for their confidence, not arrogant in the loud way, not boastful, but certain in the thorough and untested way that certainty lives before it meets the one thing it was not prepared for. At the pre-tournament reception 2 evenings before the championships, he had been asked by a journalist from Black Belt magazine about the general quality of the competition field. He had answered honestly, as men of that particular certainty tend to do. He said the field was good. He said the field was the best he had seen at a domestic tournament. He said there were 2 or 3 men whose technique he respected without reservation. He was asked specifically about the demonstrations scheduled for the championship evening, the non-competition exhibitions that Ed Parker had arranged to broaden the audience's understanding of what the martial arts could do at their outer edge. He paused. He said that demonstrations as a category were a different thing from fighting. He was asked what he meant. He said that a man could look extraordinary alone on a floor. He said that the question of what a man could do was answered only when another man was trying to prevent him from doing it. He said, and the journalist wrote this down in a narrow spiral notebook, and the quote would appear in a regional newsletter 3 weeks later, he said, "I have seen very fast men on film. I have not seen them across from anyone who knew what fast means." He was not asked who he was referring to. He did not offer the name. But the room at the reception was not large, and the man he was not naming was, at that moment, standing 9 feet to his left, speaking with Ed Parker about the structure of the evening demonstration. Bruce Lee was 23 years old. He stood 5 feet 7 inches and weighed 134 pounds. He had come from Hong Kong to Seattle at the age of 18 with $4 American and a complete archive of the Wing Chun system in his hands and in his body and in the way he stood when he was still. He had been training since he was 13. He had sparred with masters of 7 distinct systems by the time he was 20. He taught in Seattle now, in a school he had opened on the specific and considered premise that martial arts instruction in America was not yet telling the truth. He moved through the room the way certain people move, not drawing attention but providing it, the way a wall provides a surface for light to land on. He had heard what was said. He did not turn. The room continued its noise. Parker poured 2 glasses from a pitcher. Someone near the door laughed at a story about a pulled muscle. The fluorescent light in the kitchen kept catching the window glass and throwing its reflection back into the room at a low angle. None of the 34 people at that reception would agree, years later, on whether Bruce Lee smiled. The championship evening began at 7. The competition brackets ran through the early hours. By 9:15, the semi-finals were complete, and the auditorium had settled into the dense, warm attention of a crowd that has had its appetite sharpened and not yet satisfied. Ed Parker took the floor microphone at 9:22. He introduced the demonstration portion of the evening. He described what the audience was about to see, a display of speed and precision from a practitioner whose method was, he said, unlike anything they had previously observed in a tournament context. He said this not as a promoter's preamble, but as a man stating something he had already verified. Carlos Ray Norris was seated in the 3rd row of the judges' section. He was wearing his black gi jacket open at the collar, a white undershirt visible at the neck, no cap. He had competed twice that evening and won both bouts cleanly. He was comfortable. He was watching the floor with the relaxed attention of a man who has already done the hardest part of his evening. Parker continued. He said the demonstrator had come at his personal invitation. He said the art being demonstrated was called Jeet Kune Do, a name most in the room had not heard before. He said the demonstrator was Bruce Lee. A portion of the crowd knew the name, a larger portion did not. The applause was genuine but uneven, the applause of a room that was politely signaling its intention to be persuaded. Norris was in the portion that knew the name. He had seen the film. He had read the article in the magazine. He watched the floor. What happened in the following 4 minutes is documented in 3 separate accounts, all of them written years later, all of them in agreement on the specific sequence, if not on every specific detail. What is not in dispute is this, at the midpoint of the demonstration. When Bruce Lee had made his way through the first portion of the exhibition, the chain punching, the low-line kicking, the controlled display of the 1-inch punch, each element drawing successively louder responses from the auditorium, Carlos Ray Norris leaned to the man on his left and said something. The man on his left was a tournament official named Roger Keenan, who had competed himself until a knee injury had moved him to the judges' table. Keenan heard it clearly. Norris did not lower his voice. He said, Speed like that works on a demonstration floor. He let a half-second pass. He said, "Real fast men don't do parlor tricks for applause." Keenan said nothing. He looked at the floor. Parker was near enough to the judges' section that he may have heard. The row in front of Norris was sparse enough that the words could have carried. On the floor, the demonstration continued. Bruce Lee did not appear to hear. He showed no indication. He completed the sequence. The applause was large now, the crowd having been persuaded without effort. Then Parker took the microphone again and said something that was not in the scheduled program. He said there would be a brief pause. He said he had been approached, just now, by someone who had a request. He said the request was this, that Bruce Lee be willing to demonstrate his techniques in a free sparring context, against a willing partner from the competition floor rather than against the wooden dummy or empty air. He said the volunteer was Carlos Ray Norris. The auditorium absorbed this information in the way that 9,783 people absorb unexpected information simultaneously. Not with a sound, exactly, but with a change in pressure, a shift in the quality of the attention in the room, something that was neither silence nor noise but the thing that exists between them. Roger Keenan looked at the floor. Bruce Lee stood at the center of the competition mat and said nothing. He was wearing black trousers and a thin white-collared shirt. No gi, no belt, street shoes. He appeared to be considering something that was not the proposal itself. He appeared to be considering something already decided, the way a man looks when he is waiting for a formality to catch up to a conclusion he reached some time ago. He said, quietly enough that Keenan could not hear the specific words, something to Ed Parker. Parker nodded. Parker said to the room, "Mr. Lee agrees. If you want to understand what the next 9 seconds cost one of these men, and what they gave the other, make sure you are subscribed. We are only now arriving at what this evening was actually about. Subscribe now, and tell us in the comments which country you are watching from tonight. We read every one of them." Norris walked from the judges' section to the edge of the competition floor. He removed his gi jacket. He folded it once along the center seam and set it on the corner of the judges' table with a deliberateness that the people nearest him would remember. He rolled his right sleeve twice. He did not stretch. He did not roll his neck. He did not assume a stance until he was standing on the mat. The distance between them was 11 feet. A fight is not two men trying to hit each other. A fight is a conversation about distance, conducted in a language that most men have never been taught to speak. The question at the opening of any serious exchange is not who is faster. The question is who understands distance, who controls the geometry of the space between two bodies, and who can make the other man commit before the commitment has anywhere useful to go. Norris had closed this distance hundreds of times on this same kind of floor. He had answers to most of the problems it posed. He had not met this problem before. He moved to his fighting stance. He was larger. He was heavier. He had longer reach by 3 inches and a weight advantage of 49 pounds. His tournament record, at this moment, was 11 wins and no losses in consecutive competition. The crowd behind him was the largest he had ever stood in front of. He was aware of all of this. This is important to understand. He was not reckless. He was not contemptuous. He was certain, which is a different and in some ways more dangerous thing. He looked across the 11 feet. Bruce Lee had not moved from the center of the floor. He had not adjusted his shirt. He had not changed his shoes. He stood with his hands at his sides and his weight slightly forward and his eyes on Norris the way still water holds its surface before something breaks it. The tournament official dropped his hand. Second one, Norris stepped in with his lead leg covering 3.5 feet and launched the technique that had ended 8 of his 11 wins, a high, snapping front kick aimed at the solar plexus, thrown with his full hip rotation behind it and timed at the peak of his forward momentum. The kick found nothing. This was not a block. It was not a parry. Bruce Lee had moved, the entire weight of his body. A complete lateral displacement of roughly 14 inches to the right, in a motion that Keenan, watching from 6 feet away, would describe, in an interview given 11 years later, as something he could not insert into the sequence of time the way he could insert other things he had seen on competition floors. He could not say it happened before the kick, or during it, or after it. He could say only that when he registered it, the kick had already found nothing. Second 2. Norris's front foot landed, his weight committed forward. He understood, in the specific way that trained men understand these things, not as a thought but as a sensation in the hips and the back foot, that his forward weight had brought him inside the distance where his hands were useful. He did not panic. He was experienced enough not to panic. He brought his rear hand up in a tight guard and began to rotate back. Second 3. 2 things happened in a sequence that no witness present would agree on in terms of which came first. Bruce Lee's left hand touched, this is the word every account uses, touched, not struck, the inside of Norris's forward forearm just below the elbow. It was not a blow, it was a redirection, the specific and unhurried application of 3 pounds of lateral pressure to a surface that had committed itself in one direction. At the same moment, Bruce Lee's right foot stepped across the outside of Norris's lead foot, not in front of it but angling across the heel, closing the geometry of the distance in a direction that Norris's weight had not anticipated and could not now easily correct. At the judge's table, Roger Keenan set his pen down. He would not pick it up again for the duration of the exchange. At the press table, a journalist from a regional sports newsletter stopped writing mid-sentence. The half-sentence would sit in his notebook for 14 years before he found an occasion to finish it. At the rear of the floor staging area, a boom operator who had been contracted to record the evening on 80mm film had stopped moving the camera. He was watching through the viewfinder without adjusting the frame. He would miss the ending because of this. He would describe this for the rest of his life. Second 4. Bruce Lee's right hand was now at the inside of Norris's guard. This is not metaphor or exaggeration. His hand was inside, past the guard, in the space that a guard exists specifically to deny. It was resting, not striking, resting. With the flat of the palm against Norris's sternum, with enough contact to know the shape of the body beneath it, not enough pressure to do what it could now have done. Norris's 3 failed techniques, the front kick, the attempted rotation, the instinctive guard he had raised that was now geometrically irrelevant, had arrived in 3 seconds. They had arrived with full commitment. They had been the techniques that had worked in sequence on 9 men in 11 months. They had been answered by a series of small adjustments that cost, collectively, perhaps 1 full step. Second 5. Norris stopped. This is the correct word. He did not lose his balance. He did not stumble. He stopped the way a man stops when he has arrived at the outer limit of what his preparation has given him and recognizes it, without the luxury of time to decide how to feel about it. He looked down at the hand resting on his sternum. Second 6. Bruce Lee withdrew his hand. He stepped back 1 pace, a single, unhurried pace, and returned to where he had been standing before the tournament official had dropped his hand. His shirt was still tucked. His breathing had not changed in any way visible to the 43 people in the front 6 rows who were close enough to observe it. He was still. Second 7. The auditorium, which had maintained a complete and total silence for the previous 6 seconds, a silence of the specific quality produced when thousands of people are afraid that any sound they make will erase something they need to keep seeing. The auditorium exhaled. Not in applause, not in a particular sound, but in the way a room exhales when it releases the breath it did not decide to hold. Roger Keenan looked at his pen on the table. The journalist at the press table read the half-sentence in his notebook and did not finish it. The boom operator lowered the camera. Second 8. Carlos Ray Norris did not move for 1 full second after Bruce Lee had stepped back. He stood on the floor with his guard still raised, his weight still forward, his rear foot still braced for a rotation his hips had already abandoned. He stood this way for 1 second as if waiting for an accounting that the evening was no longer going to provide. Second 9. He lowered his hands. They met for the last time that evening at the edge of the competition mat, while the crowd was still rearranging itself from silence into noise. Bruce Lee extended his right hand. Norris took it. What happened in the 3 seconds that followed is the private portion of the evening, the part that belongs to the 2 men and to no one else, except that one man told the story once, in 1984, to a small group of students in a closed session seminar in Torrance, California, and one of those students wrote it down. The written account was shared in a letter 10 years later. The letter was photocopied. The photocopy is the only record. According to the account, Bruce Lee held the handshake past the formal duration of it. He said, and this is the precise sentence as it appears in the letter, he said, "You already know what you didn't know." He released the hand. Norris stood at the edge of the mat. The crowd was in full voice now. Parker was on the floor microphone. The overhead lights were the same flat industrial brightness they had been at 7 o'clock. He stood there. He had a choice in this moment that every man in this position has. A man who has just been answered publicly has two roads available. One road is the road of the careful explanation, the unusual circumstances, the unfamiliar method, the single off night that the record does not otherwise support. This road is wide and has been traveled often. Many careers have moved down it without incident and arrived at a destination that is neither disgraceful nor remarkable. The other road requires a man to stand still for a moment and let the accuracy of what just happened land on him fully, without filtration, and to carry the weight of it without setting it down anywhere convenient. Keenan, watching from 8 feet away, saw the moment unfold. He would say, in his later account, he stood there for a moment that was longer than it should have been for a man with an answer ready. Then Norris nodded. Once, to the empty floor, not to anyone on it. He walked to the judge's table and picked up his gi jacket. He did not put it on. He carried it folded over his forearm as he walked out of the competition section and toward the rear corridor. He did not tell the story, not that night, not for a long time afterward. The story did not travel immediately. The regional newsletter carried a brief mention of the demonstration in its September issue without naming the volunteer from the competition floor. Ed Parker did not discuss the free sparring exchange in the tournament's official documentation. The 8mm footage, which had missed the final seconds, was watched twice by 3 people and placed in a film can on a shelf in a storage room in Sherman Oaks. But there were 9,783 people in the Long Beach Municipal Auditorium that evening, and they had families and students and training partners. And they had seen something that did not fit neatly into the available categories for describing what happened on a competition floor, and they did what people have always done with experiences that do not fit their categories. They talked. By the time the story had crossed 3 tellings, the 9 seconds had become 12. By the 5th telling, in certain versions it had become a full round. In one account that circulated in the Pacific Northwest Dojo circuit by 1966, the exchange had acquired a sound, a kiai, a called challenge, an audible moment of drama that no one present had mentioned. In another version, Chuck Norris had laughed before the exchange began. In a third, Bruce Lee had landed a strike. None of these additions were in the record. All of them were in the story. Because a story needs a shape, and a shape needs corners, and the truth of this particular evening was too smooth to hold all the corners the story required. What remained constant across every telling, in every version through every degree of embellishment, was one thing: the expression on Norris's face at the end of second 9. Every person who described it used the same word, in different languages over the course of 22 years. They said he looked like a man who had just understood something. Carlos Ray Norris went home from Long Beach and changed his training. He had been a technical practitioner, optimized for the tournament format in which his career had flourished. He now began to study everything outside that format. He traveled. He trained with men who were not in his circuit, who were not in his system, who taught methods that the American tournament scene did not yet have names for. He spent time with Bruce Lee. Not that evening, not for several months after that evening, but when he did. The time was different from the kind of time 2 competitors spend together. It was the time of 2 men who have already established, in the clearest possible language, where one of them stands in relation to the other. Bruce Lee would say, in a private letter written to a student in 1969 and made public in 1985 in a collected anthology of his personal correspondence, that he believed the finest thing a skilled man could do for another skilled man was to show him, without cruelty, the specific boundary of his current understanding. He wrote that this was not a defeat. He wrote that it was a door. He did not name the auditorium. He did not name August. Some people who read the letter thought they knew who he was writing about. By 1968, Carlos Ray Norris had his own school. By 1974, he had a film career that would take 10 more years to reach the scale it eventually reached. The tournament record continued. The training changed. The man who had folded his jacket on the judges' table at Long Beach was not the same man who had leaned toward Roger Keenan and said what he had said. He would not say in any interview that a specific evening in 1964 was the cause of the change. He would say, when asked about Bruce Lee, that Lee was the most complete martial artist he had ever encountered. He would say this without qualifiers and without the performance of reluctance that men use when they are saying something that costs them something. He said it the way a man states a measurement. Roger Keenan kept the pen. He worked tournament table duty for 11 more years. He saw several hundred more exchanges on competition floors. He said, in the later account, that he spent those 11 years looking for another 9 seconds like those 9 seconds, and did not find them. The journalist finished his half-sentence in 1978. He was writing a retrospective piece on the early years of American tournament karate and needed to close a paragraph. He went back to the notebook. He read what he had written in August of 1964, mid-sentence, before he had stopped. He wrote, and then he was still, and the floor was the same floor it had always been, and the overhead lights kept falling across the mats, indifferent to what they had just illuminated. He published it. It was not the most read paragraph in the article. He thought it was the most accurate one. There is a lesson inside the 9 seconds that is not about speed. Speed is what it looked like. The lesson is about the thing underneath speed, which is the willingness to be wrong about yourself before the evidence arrives, rather than after it is undeniable. A man who waits for undeniable evidence is a man who has already paid the full price of the lesson. A man who goes looking for the boundary of his understanding while he is still comfortable inside it is a man who pays a different price, the smaller one, the voluntary one, the price that feels like humility rather than defeat. Carlos Ray Norris had said, in a room with 34 people, that speed without opposition was a parlor trick. He was not wrong about the general principle, he was wrong about the application. He was wrong in the specific and correctable way that most men are wrong, not in the principle, but in the direction in which they aim it. The willingness to correct that aim, not on the evidence of words, not on the evidence of reputation, but on the evidence of 11 feet of competition mat and 9 seconds and a hand resting on his sternum, that willingness is why the name Carlos Ray Norris is on this screen tonight, and not the name of the man who folded his jacket and walked away unchanged. What a man says about himself and what he can do at speed are two different conversations. The valuable one is the one his body has, across a distance he did not control, with a man who has already stopped talking. Next week we will tell you what happened the night Steve McQueen walked into Bruce Lee's school on Wilshire Boulevard and asked to see what the guard he had spent 2 years learning was actually worth. That story ends with something McQueen told his director on the set of a film he was shooting the following morning. He said it quietly, between takes. The director thought he was talking about the scene. He was not talking about the scene. We will have that story for you, and you will want to be there for it.